So now I want to talk about conditioning. And conditioning is vital because we're creatures of habit. So what is conditioning? Conditioning, I'll give you an example to start off with. For example, when you're a little kid and you do something, you might look at your parents to see how they react. Or do they smile? Do they frown at you? So it's almost like you just got rewarded or punished. And obviously, you might have been punished in a different way, or you might have been rewarded in a different way for certain behavior. But what happens is that you start developing an understanding of what life is, what your role is, how things should be. So you're constantly in our society being reinforced or being punished for certain behavior. So did you smile at the person? And then how did that work out for you? Was it positive? Was it negative? Should it be reinforced? Sometimes people are aggressive because that aggressiveness is reinforced as they grew up, as they develop. So it creates a structure for our brain because our brain always looks to be efficient. That is the main goal of our brain, to the extent that a lot of research have shown that we're characterized by repetition. Our daily life is based on repetition. For example, have you ever driven a car to your job and then not even know how you got there? You know, it's like you wake up, you turn on the keys, or you get up in the morning and you stumble a little bit, you brush your teeth and you eat breakfast, and you might blink and you're like, oh, how did I make it to my job? Or you start leaving to go somewhere else from your job to your home and you space out and all of a sudden you're home. Well, that's because it's unconscious. What you did, you didn't even have to think about it. And a lot of our conditioning is unconscious, so it doesn't even fit into our radar of things that we do. We do it without even thinking. Again, our brain is efficient. And this is so powerful that studies have shown that 45% of our daily behavior is repeated, meaning that we do it over and over again. A lot of times, they are there through cues and locations. So, for example, it might be a specific place. As soon as you get home or as soon as you do something, you get home, automatically you might check your Facebook when you walk through the door. Or automatically after you eat, you put the dish down, and that cue of putting that dish down then triggers your brain to let it know that it's now time to go outside and smoke a cigarette. Or whatever it may be, a sound, an environment, a specific location, or even when you get in the car, you know, you already know that you're driving a specific direction, but as soon as you get in the car, it might trigger you to do a certain behavior. So a lot of the things, our car, our dining room, our bathroom, our bedroom, our office space, it all triggers us to behave a specific way. So keep that in mind, that if 45% of your daily behaviors are repeated specifically by cue and location, then the issue is that it's hard to change sometimes because your prefrontal cortex, which is that critical part of your thinking, that part that makes you reason, that part that makes you say, well, I don't really want to do that, actually kind of shuts down a little bit because you get on automatic mode. And what studies show, for example, MIT has demonstrated, is that when you make changes, it actually changes your neural activity in your brain, your patterns, the way it fires. But when you are exposed to that cue, once again, of that old pattern, even though you let it go, if that cue is strong enough, that trigger is strong enough, then what happens is that it reemerges. That pattern actually reemerges again. So it's almost like you have to build the new pattern, the new habit, enough time that you have to change certain your environment so your conditioning can be extinguished. So you can let that go and create a new structure. Because realistically, if you want to create a new story, you have to change some of your conditioning. And I'll give you more examples of how powerful conditioning really is. For example, I had a student that had a relationship, and I've talked about this other times, that the guy wanted to call her all the time. He's like, you know, I want to call you. She's like, I don't understand. He wants to talk to me. He wants to call me. And now he wants to move closer. I used to see him like once a week. And now he wants probably going to want to see me almost every day. You know, what kind of relationship is that? And blah, blah, blah. So I talked to her and I said, so what did your dad do for a living? And her eyes shot wide open. Because she realized that her dad traveled for a living. So her definition, what she'd been conditioned in a relationship, was that you only interact on the weekend, or you only communicate so often between her mom and her dad. So she was recreating that conditioning with her own relationship. And the more she thought about it, she's like, well, maybe that's not what I want in my relationship. So we have this thing called the big lie, is that our past doesn't affect us. But we have to realize that that conditioning is driving our daily behavior, is driving our belief systems, our BS. So we have to wake up to that condition. We have to wake up and tell ourselves, is this really what I want? So in my life, for example, I was conditioned to think that you moved around often, because as a youth and as a child, I used to move almost every year. So what did I do as an adult? Every year, I used to move somewhere else. And if I didn't move, I'd get itchy. It's like something wanted to scream, and I would have to move. And so that was part of what reality was to me. The same thing, if you had parents that worked an 8 to 5, and they hated their job, and they came and complained all the time, the people around you, the same thing. So your definition of working is something that you hate, that you just come home and complain. So what happens if you hate your job? What do? Do you just get home and complain about your job? Do you actually look for a solution? Do you look to maybe change your job? Do you look for different things that you could do? Or do you look to create your own job? Probably not, because you've already been conditioned to define your career in that specific way. But your conditioning does not have to define your life. It doesn't have to define what you want to do. But it can be very powerful. So you have to become aware of your conditioning. For example, you might be talking to someone and they might be wearing a specific perfume or cologne, and all of a sudden you start getting angry or frustrated when the conversation has nothing to do with something you should be getting angry and frustrated. If that happens, it's probably because you've been triggered by one of your conditioned responses. Maybe someone else used to wear that cologne or perfume that did you wrong, maybe a past relationship, or somebody that did something that hurt your feelings and stuff like that. Maybe they used a trigger word. For example, my dad's trigger word was, we need to talk. As soon as you would say that, he would get in trouble when he was a little kid. So if I told him we need to talk, he would get defensive, even though I was going to talk about something positive. So we need to break down that conditioning. So you have to develop awareness of things that you've been conditioned, some of the triggers that you have, some of your cues. For example, if you wake up and you hit the snooze button, you've already been conditioned to hear the noise, hit the snooze button, go back to sleep, hear the noise, hit the snooze button, and then you're rushing and stressed out because you're going to be late to work. But you can change that conditioning and that cue very simple. Change the noise of your actual alarm or your phone. Maybe have it come up with music that's going to motivate you, that's going to make you feel good. Because by doing that, you're actually already changing your cue. For example, you might have someone that calls you, that you're triggered by them because you've been conditioned to have a negative association with every time they call. Maybe if you change the picture that comes up when they call, it can change that cue, which then can have you have a different conversation when you talk to them, instead of starting the conversation in a negative light. So to break that conditioning again is 1, develop awareness. 2, develop exposure to different things that are going to be different than the cues that you might have, the locations that you might have. So you might need to change your environment. And then also learn some of the strategies to changing certain patterns to create a new story. So ask yourself, what are you acting? What conditioning, what role are you playing for 45% of your day? And we will give you many strategies in this course. We're going to give you different things that are going to help you developing that foundation that's going to create the awareness, that's going to create the strategies and tools that you need to be able to create a new story and break that conditioning, so that 45% of that automatic behavior that you have is behaviors that are going to help you create the story and live the story that you want. Thank you.